Welcome to the second episode of Your Big Sister in Sales. I'm Anna Merrill Glassman. I'm here to share real stories about navigating my career and empower you when you feel stuck in yours. So, if you're ready to stop spinning your wheels and start making moves that actually get you ahead, you're in the right place because I'm going to share all of the advice I wish I heard sooner as a real big sister in real life and as your big sister in sales. Welcome back, sibling gang. Episode 2 is a continuation of episode 1, where we talked about how to land a job you actually love with pay you love, culture you love, and leadership you love. So if you have not listened to episode 1 yet, I'd recommend starting there because episode 2 does build upon the foundation we set in episode 1. Last time we covered how to approach the job search like a seller to actually land an interview at a company you know you'll love working for. So at this point, you should have mapped out a promotion path at your current company if possible, revamped your LinkedIn, made a list of non-negotiables for your next role, found mentors, and then also built that list of 10 to 20 companies, whether they're hiring or not, that do not compromise on your list of non-negotiables. From there, we should have already mapped out our decision makers, potential champions, friended them all on LinkedIn, and then started sending them personalized videos and messages, as well as hopefully have held a couple of our first conversations or even invited them to a couple dinners or coffees. And now you've landed your first interview. So it's time for part 2, where we talk about how to work the interview process like a seller. In phase 1 of this episode, we're going to focus on mindset before your first interview and also strategy before you take that first interview. And sibling gang, based on episode 1, you probably already know that I believe in prepping your mindset and your work ethic before anything in life. So same thing applies here with interviews. I'm going to ask you, please, to control the controllables. You're the only one that can advocate for yourself in your career and your financial wellness journey. So I am going to address a bit of a hot take here, and I do want to hear a little bit from you guys in the comments after this episode. But we have all seen creators and influencers that warn you not to move forward in interview processes that require working for free before the job. So you know what those are, those requirements to do a 30, 60, 90-day plan, maybe a mock discovery call or some type of technical assessment like Excel modeling tests or something along that line. Here's my take though, sibling gang. When influencers say don't work for free, I say they're wrong. And that's because if you're following your big sister in sales and you've already gone through the steps in episode 1, you've done your homework and you've validated that the company culture, compensation, and leadership all align with your non-negotiables. So in that case, yes, putting in that work to do those extra mile steps in the interview process is actually worth it. This is a stage where companies are trying to validate whether you can solve for the pain points they're looking to hire you to fix. So I really want you guys to think like a seller here. Right now, we're in the pre-sales process or the pre-close process here. So this is where if you were a prospect evaluating a tool or a service that a company is offering, you're going to try to understand if the person that you're working with or the company that you're looking to buy from can solve the problem that you're looking to solve, and if their product can do that in a way that you're willing to pay for. So when a company asks you to do some heavy lifting, please don't listen to those career gurus who tell you it's a red flag. Instead, I want you to flip the script here because you've already done your homework. You know if this company is a company that you want to work for. So it's worth putting in this extra effort. I'd want you to ask yourself this too, sibling thing. Why should a company pay top dollar for you if you don't show them what you're made of? This is an opportunity to build value. So the more value you build in this stage, the more you can potentially negotiate a higher starting offer later on. So if you want to earn more than a livable wage or work for top tier companies and surround yourself with different leaders and colleagues that inspire you, then prove you're worth it. And again, the companies are going to prove they're worth it too, right? You've already done that vetting ahead of time, but you're going to continuously pressure test companies and interviewers during the interview process to make sure that anything said in the interview process continues to align with your list of non-negotiables. And if it doesn't, totally fine to remove the company from the interview process here, guys. I'd also say set your expectations up to go through 5 to 7 rounds of interviews. This used to seem outlandish years ago when you're interviewing for an individual contributor role, not a management role or a C-suite level role. But in today's day and age, especially at companies that are sought after by a lot of employees, they are going to do a lot of due diligence to make sure they're bringing on the right person because it costs a lot of money to ramp somebody to be a fully performing employee. So they're going to do their due diligence, and sibling gang, so are you. You're going to make sure you're only applying to companies like you learned in episode 1 that actually fit your list of non-negotiables. So again, if you want to close a job or land a job that you actually love, set your expectations up here and know that you're going to have to work hard in this interview process to land the job that you actually love, but it will be worth it. So moving to phase 2, this is visualization, deep breathing, and meditation. I did visualizations before every single interview. I believe it's super important because our minds are incredibly powerful. And the more we focus on a positive outcome, the more likely that positive outcome becomes. But vice versa too, sibling gang. If you're focusing on negative outcomes, you're going to manifest that instead. And there's actually science backing this. There's a really cool study that some of you may have heard of athletes who were asked to train free throws in basketball. One group was allowed to do the actual physical activity of shooting the basket, and then the other group was asked to sit down, not move, and visualize making the shot. If you haven't heard of this study before, guess which one performed better, which group performed better here. It was actually the group that did visualization. I remember reading this and thinking, or hearing about this study and thinking it was unbelievable that that was the group that actually did better, but it's true. And it does show you how powerful your brain is. And I actually had a real life experience in this when I played softball in college. I developed something called the yips. And for anybody that doesn't know what that is, it's basically when all of a sudden you cannot perform a simple skill that you have been able to do hundreds of thousands of times before. So in my case, that was throwing the ball back to the pitcher. I was a catcher and outfielder, and I had no problem absolutely throwing a line drive all the way from right field to the catcher to tag someone out at home plate, but I couldn't for the life of me throw the ball back to the pitcher only a couple feet away. I would pump fake like 2 or 3 times before I'd actually release the ball, throw it into the ground, throw it over her head. And it took me a little while to understand that I could fix this with visualization. So while I don't actually play softball anymore, I don't have any problem throwing back from the catcher position to the pitcher's mound because I spent a lot of time visualizing the throw, and now I can throw it fine. So the same thing is going to apply here during your interview processes. There's just so many nerves that you guys experience, and the best thing to do is train the machine between your ears, right? I will prepare a visualization practice that you guys can listen to at the end of this podcast. The podcast episode is going to look like it's really, really long. I'm going to save the visualization for the end. So those of you who would like to go through a guided visualization, have that at the end of this episode. But what I recommend is to sit in a space that is similar to where you're actually going to take the interview. If the interview is virtual, even better. Set up your home office or a little corner of your house or apartment that you know you're going to take the interview from. Close your eyes, take a couple deep breaths. I like to use the breathing technique called the box breath that I learned in therapy. And I'm going to say sibling gang therapy is an amazing tool to help you guys overcome different challenges in your career and financial wellness journey, along with personal journey. So I'll talk about this quite a lot throughout the podcast. But one of the techniques, like I said, box breathing, is fantastic to help lower your heart rate and bring you into a grounded state of mind, which is where you really want to be, grounded and confident before an interview. You're going to inhale for 4 seconds, hold that breath for 4 seconds, and then exhale for 4 seconds. I usually repeated that breath practice 3 or 4 times, and I stop once I felt a calm heart rate and felt kind of present in my body without my thoughts flickering around full of anxiety. A bonus tip that I really like to use when I'm going through challenging interview processes, or even today when I'm taking challenging sales calls, is avoiding caffeine before those interviews or challenging calls. And I'm a huge fan of caffeine sibling gang. So for me, I understand why this is hard, but it's better to wait and drink something caffeinated after your interview. You can even use it like a reward system. So for me, I wouldn't drink any caffeine ahead of time. I didn't want to add any caffeine to my body to cause any type of anxiety. And I would just set my expectation to work hard during the interview, execute the interview, and then reward myself with a coffee afterwards. We're going to move to phase 3 here. This is about making a list of your references. And I probably should have included this in episode 1, but we're going to talk about it in episode 2 anyway. You want to make sure that you have a list of people who are ready to hop on the phone or hop on a call and give you a warm referral, or what I mean to say here is talk to the interviewer and say you are a great candidate to move forward with. You want to make sure that the people in this list of references are a combination of mentors from inside companies you've worked with before, past managers, also peers you've worked with on the same team, and even external mentors. And what I like to do to make sure a mentor stays in touch with me, or my future references and I are in touch and are up to date on each other's lives, is every so often, if their name pops into my head, I'll reach out to them on LinkedIn or give them a call. And if you want to be even more strategic about this, I would recommend reaching out every 6 months or so to check in on what they're doing in their lives and what's been going on in your lives. Now, when you're actively interviewing, you want to reach out to all of your references, let them know the type of jobs you're interviewing for, and ask their permission to use them as a reference ahead of time. And let them know that you're actively interviewing so they're prepared to receive a text from you at any point that says, hey, the interviewer is probably going to want to call you tomorrow or 2 days from now. Will you be around? And then also, sibling gang, please, if they actually make a reference call for you or answer a call for you, say thank you, send them a letter, send them a nice message. Make sure they see how appreciative you are of their time and the fact that they took a call that they did not have to take in order to help you land a job that you actually love. Moving to phase 4, now that you've landed the interview, we're going to prep for this interview process like a seller. So the first thing we're going to do is tap on that network of champions that currently work at the company that you've built. You want to reach out to them and ask questions like, hey, what type of questions usually come up in this round of the interview? You can also get their perspective on what the interviewer might prioritize or what they're looking for. Now, you can also take this time to research the company and different things that are going on at the organization. So whether they released a new product, whether they have an exciting merger that just took place, you want to be aware of the trends in the industry and what's going on with the company so you can leverage that industry knowledge in the conversation. So check LinkedIn, type into whatever your AI of choice is, and ask them what's going on with the organization that would be pertinent to know if you're an interviewee at the company. And then I would also say researching aspects that you can leverage as genuine rapport building items is super important and often underrated. People remember how you make them feel in a conversation. They do not, in most cases, unless they have a photographic memory or a really great memory, will not remember absolutely everything that was said in the conversation, but they will leave remembering how you made them feel. So, my favorite strategy was to start every single interview with some type of genuine, authentic rapport building moment. And you can find things that are relatable to the person between you and the person that's interviewing you by doing a little bit of light research on LinkedIn. Look at their bios, see if they mention anything about their careers that is particularly relevant or about their personal lives that is particularly relevant. And then also lean on your champions. Ask them, hey, like, what's this person like? What do they like to do outside of work? What do they like to do for fun? Some of the aspects that I found out, or the elements I found out that I used for rapport building with my interviewers were things like women supporting women, Harry Potter, of course, cats, because I found out one of the people interviewing me was a big cat lover, and then also Spanish. And I'll give you guys a real life example of how I did this in my interview process with User Gems. In one of the final interview rounds, I was being interviewed by the CEO, Christian Ketzel, and I found out ahead of time from one of my champions that he is a cat person because apparently on one of the calls that happened, like one of the company all hands, there was a massive debate about which animal was better, cats or dogs. And there was a huge group of cat people and dog people that split the company. And Christian happened to fall on the side of being a fan of cats. At the time, this was really, and it still is, very relevant to me. I have always been a big advocate for rescuing animals and fostering to adopt. This is a side note that I'll talk about in some other episodes too. If you guys don't know about the rescue community or foster community, I encourage you, even implore you to learn about it. There's so many animals in shelters and rescues today that will be euthanized if we don't have fosters taking them out and letting them live in the home until they are adopted out. And it's something that can bring a lot of fulfillment in your life outside of work. We'll talk about that in a different episode. But back to the example here. At the time I was fostering kittens, and because I found out that Christian was a huge fan of cats, I actually started my interview with the CEO of my company by showing him a video of the cats that I was fostering. It was probably the first and only time he's ever had an interview start that way. I'll have to ask him. And I know that it was something that was memorable, and it was a rapport building piece that was really genuine to both of us that I was able to then weave into the follow-up message to make the follow-up thank you even more personal. We're going to move into prepping for common interview questions at this point. So I really like to use the method or the STAR method to answer questions. If you guys haven't heard of the STAR method before, go ahead and type it in on Google or whatever AI you like to use. But basically, it is an acronym that stands for situation, task, action, and result. And this lets you structure answers to interview questions in a really clear and concise way, while also giving tangible examples of how you've done whatever they're asking you about in your past jobs. So an example of this is if somebody asks you a question like, tell me about a time you successfully generated new business from a cold prospect. If you were to use the STAR method to answer this question, you would start with S, situation, and say, in my last role, I was assigned a territory with no existing business and no warm leads. Moving to T, task, you could say something like, my objective was to generate new revenue by identifying and engaging with new prospects. Moving to A, action, you could say, I researched the target market and the companies that could benefit from our solution, and I developed a personalized outreach strategy, mixing in emails, cold calls, LinkedIn touches, and even on-site visits with decision makers. And when I met with them, I focused on understanding their pain points before pitching. And after several touch points, I secured a discovery call with a promising prospect. Then you move to R, the result. This part is super important, I would say. And you'd say something like, that prospect became a client or $100,000 deal with them in 3 months, and they successfully helped me exceed my quarterly quota by 20%. This is a really unique way to answer questions. I hadn't heard of it, I think before my interview process with UserGem started, I had not heard of this method before. It's something I learned from my mentor. Again, this is another reason to leverage a mentor because especially if they've been in a hiring role before, they're going to know the type of techniques and methods that are the best to employ in an interview process. We're going to move to the next step, which is practicing out loud for these interview questions and answers, as well as probably more importantly, practicing through visualization sessions. So if you want to practice out loud, pretty self-explanatory. You can record yourself asking the question and then answering them. You can role play with a friend on the phone. That's what I did a lot, like walking around, taking walks and talking on the phone to practice. And then most importantly, I would say taking the time to actually visualize the interview process or that particular interview. And I would either do this during the day in the place that I was going to take the interview from in my home office, or I also really liked doing this when I was laying in bed getting ready to fall asleep. I don't know if there's science behind this. This is something I should probably look up, but I found that if I visualized before going to bed, I woke up with the visualization really firmly ingrained in my brain. Perhaps that has something to do with how the subconscious mind works when you're asleep. And I felt incredibly confident for the interview after doing that visualization technique while I was falling asleep. And then the next piece to this is one of the best times to set yourself up for success is a couple minutes before the interview actually starts. So get yourself seated in the spot that you're going to take the interview from, or try to kind of visualize yourself in the room with the person interviewing you if it's in person, and visualize the process start to finish, kind of in a fast forward mode right before the interview starts, and you're going to be in a great frame of mind to take the interview. Step 5 is kind of a bonus step here. You don't have to do this, but I find it can help you look very proactive and help get in extra information to support your success in the interview process. This is sending a prep email. So you can send a quick email or message ahead of time that thanks the interviewer for the opportunity. Then you can also share what you've prepped with them, saying, hey, I've prepared to discuss XYZ on the call. Please let me know if there's anything additional that you'd like me to be prepared to talk about. They might not respond, but if they do, you have some more information that will help you prepare. And like I said before, it will help you look very proactive and professional before actually entering the interview. Step 6, this is something that I'm sure you guys already know, but I feel it's important to say anyway. Make sure you dress the part. It is so much better to arrive overdressed than underdressed. So overdress, make sure you feel confident, but dress to impress here. And if you are doing a virtual interview, your presentation on screen is also super important. So good lighting is important. You can sit yourself in front of a window to have nice natural light, or even buy a $5 ring light on Walmart to help with that. Step number 7, this is going to be one of my favorite tactics that's directly from sales that I want you guys leveraging in the interview process. This is overcoming objections in all rounds of the interview. So for my sibling gang that aren't sellers, an objection in this scenario is going to be a spoken or unspoken concern that the interviewer has about your candidacy. The reason it's important to mention that it might be unspoken is because at the end of your interview, you usually have about 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes, that the interviewer gives you to ask your own questions. I want you to first and foremost take this time to uncover if there's any concern, unspoken, that the interviewer has about moving you forward. This will give you an opportunity to address that concern and maybe even address a misunderstanding in how you answered an interview question so you can move forward, whereas you might not have moved forward. The way you can ask these questions, or here I'm going to list a couple of examples of great questions to uncover objections. The first one is there anything I have or haven't said today that would cause concern about moving me forward to the next round? The other question I like to use is, what is one red flag or yellow flag you see in moving me forward to the next round? I know these are vulnerable questions too, sibling gang. I know that nobody wants to be rejected or feel judged or be in a position to feel defensive. But this is especially important to ask at every stage of the interview process because it gives you an opportunity to overcome the concern. So, one of the examples that happened in my interview process was a clear-cut example of misunderstanding the point of the question being asked. When I got to the end of the interview, I asked that red flags question, and the person interviewing me said, I don't really have any red flags, but I have a barely yellow flag. When you answered the question about strengths and weaknesses, you listed things like how you're coachable, you're driven, and then you said you struggle with perfectionism or burning out, but you didn't say anything around the sales skills that you have as strengths and weaknesses. When I found that out, I realized I had misunderstood the objective of this interviewer's question. So I asked for a chance to answer the question again using those things that they were looking for. And I was able to answer them successfully and remove any yellow flag that they had and move forward in the interview process. So I'll give you kind of the framework I like to use in how to respond to these objections when they're brought up. I would say always, always, always start by listening from a place of understanding and gratitude because it only serves to your benefit that they're giving you this information. So please don't get defensive here, sibling gang. It will benefit you to have this opportunity to address the objection. My framework for handling the objections is to first start off with a statement of an understanding, saying something like, totally hear you there, or I see why what I said came across that way, or something along that line. And then thanking them for expressing that to you. Then I would do some type of permission-based ask. So I'd say something like, I'd love to address that concern if you're open to it. Is that okay? And then I'd address the objection. And then I'd reassess or do another temperature check on how my response handled their objection. So I might say something like, did this address your concern? And then outside of this, what else, if anything, would stop you from moving me to the next round? Okay, so we're going to talk about stage 5 at this point. This is bringing me back to the little bit of a hot take I mentioned before around influencers saying do not do any free work during the interview process. This is the stage of the interview that you could equate to a demo during a sales process. This is where you're building value and demonstrating that the things your product that you sell or the service that you offer does allow you to execute on the goals or the problems that your prospect is trying to solve for. So again, this is your opportunity to seriously to show them how dangerously good you are, right? And build your value so that when you go into the round where you're negotiating your offer, you've demonstrated how impressive you are and you have more leverage to negotiate that offer from. So in order to nail this phase, let's say they're asking you to do a live role play, maybe a mock call or some type of public policy scenario with like a briefing or presentation. I'm going to want you to first lean on your champions here. So ask them exactly what the evaluation panel is looking for. You can ask your champion questions like, what are 3 things I need to execute on really well to blow them away? Then I'd also say, where do most people fall short here? And then you could say something along the line of, would you be open to practicing with me and giving me feedback before I present? Keep in mind that your champion has worked within this company culture and environment for some time at this point in most cases, so they know what makes the interviewer or the interview panel tick and what's going to really impress them. They have the type of inside information that you could constitute as like sharing a secret or intel if you're a CIA agent. So please lean on your champions here. And then when you actually execute the mock call portion or the demo portion of your interview process, I want you guys to write down notes like your life depends on it. You want to appear as coachable and as open to feedback as possible. And you shouldn't just appear this way, sibling gang. You really, really should be. Because if you want to continue leveling up in your career and finances, you have to come at this journey from a place of a growth mindset. So write down absolutely everything that they're giving you for feedback, because if you have an opportunity to maybe do another presentation incorporating that feedback, or do another mock call incorporating that feedback, imagine if you're able to start the call or start the session by saying, hey, in the last mock scenario, you guys gave me 10 pieces of feedback, and you can read out those pieces of feedback. In this presentation today, I'm going to incorporate that feedback, and I want you guys to look for the areas that I've incorporated it in and let me know if I miss anything or if you would have added anything. I did this in my interview process, and it was something that really helped me win that session or win that section of the interview and move ahead. Again, this is a great opportunity to show how coachable you are and build your value. Let's move on to the next phase. This is closing on the interviews. So in sales, you guys probably, if you're not sellers, have heard this term like closing the deal. Some people say always be closing. It's a strategy that we like to use in sales quite a lot to kind of pressure test how close to winning the deal we are. So I would say you can use this tactic even in the interview process, kind of like handling objections to see how well you executed on the interview. You can also try to use closing strategies to help keep momentum alive in the interview process and move you to the next round quickly, and to help you time box when you're receiving an offer. So I did this in a couple of ways in my interview process with User Gems. On each call, after handling the objections or asking the interviewer if there were any objections, I would always ask about timeline and try to get an understanding of how long it would be before I had the next call, so that if I didn't hear back right away, I could make sure I referred back to the timeline they talked about. Now, when you're farther along in the interview process and based on the intel you've gotten from your champions, you know that you're a top candidate, you can get a little bit more aggressive, to use an unclassier, not so elegant word, in your attempts for closing here. So one of the ways that I did that during my User Gems interview process to keep the momentum going was I mentioned that I had another offer I was already given, but that User Gems was actually my top choice of the two companies. At this stage, I still had another round of interviews to go through before even finding out if I was going to get an offer. So on the call with the interviewer, I said, listen, like I owe this company an answer by end of next week. Could we try to expedite the next round of interviews? So on that call, live on the interview, the interviewer put the last couple rounds of interviews on the calendar with me for the next day. In that last call, before I was going to get my offer, I used some closing questions. So I asked things like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your confidence that I'm the person you want to hire for this role, and why? And then my absolute favorite question that left one of my current colleagues speechless during one of my interviews is, if you had to choose to hire me today with no further steps in the process, would you hire me? In the sales world, this is akin to asking a prospect if you are vendor of choice, price aside. And the reason this is important for my non-selling folks listening to the call is because if they say yes to a question like that, you know that you have all of the skills needed and you've built so much value that they know you are the right person for the job. So at this point, the only hurdle you have to get through at that point is negotiating the offer. It is a really, really bold question. And I would say I practice this in visualization sessions quite a lot, but it's super valuable because it lets you know exactly where you stand. And it also gives you a little bit of leverage when it comes to how aggressively you can negotiate your offer. The next phase here are follow-ups with every single interview. And you do need to do this after every single interview. My favorite format for a follow-up message is to start with a genuine thank you. And then I move into picking one or two items that I learned or things that I learned during the interview that I know I could potentially impact at the company. And then I'll move into something personal that I learned, like that rapport building element, and then I'll close out the email. And this is actually an area I fumbled in the user gems process. And I was able to uncover the fact that I fumbled this and didn't really set myself up for success here by asking an objection or one of those objection handling questions during an interview round. I asked, I think, the red flag question, and it came up. I had missed a follow-up email after one of my interviews. It's not a good thing, right? So I am so glad I asked that objection handling question because I had the opportunity to make up for it by writing a really personalized thank you email, weaving in aspects of the rapport that I had built. In this case, I think it was talking about Harry Potter and the house that this interviewer was in. And that helped me take away the concern that the person had and continue moving forward to obviously get the job that I'm in today. Moving to the final phases here. These phases are what you should be doing throughout the entire interview process from interview 1 to interview 7 or 8. Continue champion building, continue nurturing relationships, and continue multi-threading throughout your interview process. This is about deepening relationships so you can increase the information, like the insider information you're getting to help you have stronger leverage on each round of the interview. So for step number 1, building champions, keep your champions involved during every round. Every time you finish an interview round, let them know how it went. Give them an opportunity to genuinely cheer you on and give you tips about who you're meeting with next. So one of the things that I really like to do is ask them, hey, like for this next round of interviews, like I mentioned before, what should I know about this person? What type of questions would they appreciate me asking? Again, this is all great information that if you didn't do that work ahead of time to build a champion, you wouldn't have. And a lot of people that are looking at trying to break into different companies today don't do this step. So this is one of the ways that is going to help you stand out. Step 2 to this is continue multi-threading. So you may have already landed conversations with directors of different departments at this stage, and maybe you've even turned them into champions. So what I'm saying here, they don't need to be a director, but I'm saying somebody at a higher level than you. You want to be landing conversations through multi-threading with people who are in leadership roles in different departments. Because in a lot of companies, these people could be individuals that end up interviewing you at different rounds of the interview process. So imagine how great it will be if you've already built a relationship with them before that section of the interview. That actually happened to me at User Gems. I had built a really nice relationship a couple weeks before with one of the directors of a different department. And this person ended up being one of my last 3 interviews. And it felt like a conversation with a friend because we had already built such a nice relationship. So do that legwork ahead of time because it really helps put you in a position for success, sibling gang, before you get to the final rounds. That's it for today, sibling gang. This is your big sister in sales. Thank you so much for listening to the second episode ever of this podcast. And if you got something out of this, I would love for you to please take a second to follow, rate, and share this podcast with somebody that you think would benefit from learning this information. And if you want to show even more love, you can support the podcast with a small donation using the link that I'll include in the show notes. Every bit helps me keep this going because I am doing this as a free resource because I think this information should be free. So I appreciate any donations you guys are open to giving. And please Get ready for the next episode. This is going to be jam-packed of valuable information for sellers in particular on how to ace your ramp. And remember, sibling gang, stick around. If you're somewhere you can close your eyes and practice the visualization techniques for the interview. I'm going to go through that in a moment. But if you can't do that now, until next time, I'm rooting for you, and I'll see you in the next episode of Your Big Sister in Sales. Moving to the guided visualization exercise to prepare you for the interview process. Let's begin by bringing yourself into a relaxed position, seated or standing, wherever feels most natural and wherever is most relatable to where you'll take your next interview. Start by noticing your body. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Notice the steadiness of the earth, the quiet support holding you, keeping you grounded. You are safe. You are supported. If it feels safe for you, gently close your eyes or soften your gaze. Let's take 3 slow, intentional breaths together. Inhale for 5, 4, 3, 2. Hold for 5, 4, 3, 2. Exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2. Let's repeat this breath 2 more times. Inhale for 5, 4, 3, 2. Exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2. Inhale for 5, 4, 3, 2. Hold for 5, 4, 3, 2. Exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2. Now, in your mind's eye, begin to picture the setting where your interview will take place. Is it Zoom? In a conference? Over a coffee? You can see the details. The light in the room, the chair you're sitting in, the screen or table in front of you. Inhale in, confidence. Exhale out, anxiety. Notice the air around you. Is it cool or warm? Notice the textures, the sounds, the stillness. You are there. You're calm. You are prepared and present. Now imagine the interviewer greeting you. They smile. You smile back. You take a deep breath, inhaling and exhaling. You introduce yourself. Your voice is strong and grounded. You see the interviewer ask the first interview question. You hear it. You've practiced this one. Pause and imagine the words you will say. Confidently, clearly. Let the answer form in your mind now. Inhale, exhale. The interviewer smiles. They compliment your answer. Now, a second question. Maybe this is the one that used to make you nervous, but this time you're grounded. You're connected to your story. You know the value you bring, and you communicate it clearly. Let the answer form in your mind now. Inhale, exhale. The interviewer smiles again. They compliment your answer again. Now picture the moment you share your proudest accomplishment. Feel how your chest lifts a little, how a smile forms on your lips. You believe what you're saying. You sound like someone who has done the work because you have. Let yourself feel proud. Feel that confidence in your ability shine through your brain, eyes, smile. It's like a golden light that moves from the crown of your head to your arms, fingers, legs, and toes. Notice the interviewer. They're smiling again, clearly impressed with your past accomplishments. They're nodding, listening deeply. You've created a connection. You've sparked their curiosity. They're imagining you on the team already. Inhale, exhale. Let's go to the close of the interview. You thank them for their time. You ask an objection handling question. And it's not surprising to you. They have no concern to move you forward. In fact, they're confident in moving you to the next round. Inhale, exhale. Pause for just a moment. Notice how you feel. Maybe your heart is beating slowly and steadily. Maybe you move your fingers and your toes as you bring awareness back to the present moment. Maybe you tilt your head to the right and then to the left, bringing movement back to your body. Take one final deep breath in. Inhale confidence. Exhale doubt. Bring awareness back to the room. When you're ready, open your eyes. You've embodied the successful version of yourself. You've crushed the first interview and landed the second. That's all for today's episode, Sibling Gang. Thanks for sticking around for this bonus portion. And remember, I'm rooting for you. See you next time.